So guys, now I'm bringing on another speaker about Polkadot, which is really cool because we're transitioning. We mentioned a little bit about the Polkadot Treasury in the last talk, and I think now we're going to get to learn more about that. So I'm introducing David Hawig, Head of Grants at the Web3 Foundation.
Hey,
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you okay. Sounds a little bit broken. Can you speak again?
Yeah, I can go closer to the mic, but worst case,
Yeah.
Does it work? Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah, maybe first a few words about myself. I'm working for the Web3 Foundation, so the entity behind Polkadot and Kusama. And yeah, before I joined Web3, I actually was working for my own startup. And we applied for a lot of hey Elizabeth, we applied for a lot of grants ourselves. So I actually have the experience of applying for grants and also giving out grants. So I know both sides of the table. Maybe let's try to share my screen. All right. Yep. Okay, I'm going to talk today about the grants program as well as the Treasury. So maybe first the advertisement block about our grants program, because before we actually come to the Treasury. And yeah, let's start. First, a quick overview of our grants program. We usually focus on funding open source software development and research efforts. We focus on Polkadot, Kusama, and Substrate, but we usually support the entire Web3 ecosystem to a certain degree. But obviously, we collected funds for developing these three systems, and we also know we have the knowledge about these systems and know how to advance them. A few statistics about the program. We so far given out around 9 million, more than 500 applications. I think by now we signed over 200 projects and from all over the world, and the program originally started in 2018. As you can see in the diagram, actually, we are scaling up at the moment to a certain degree, and in the last month we almost signed 30 grant projects. So basically, every day we signed a grant project. What we are looking for, just to give you some examples, because usually we are interested in everything you are interested in the Web3 ecosystem, as long as it's open source and somehow beneficial for the entire ecosystem. So great examples are usually startups. We want to support any kind of early stage startup developing, for example, proof of concept. We don't support the later stages if there's a business model or something behind it. Generally, teams shouldn't seek to cover 100% of the early stage funding via grants. And yeah, I could give you some examples here, like supply chain, DeFi, and things like this. But as I said in the beginning, we are usually looking for your ideas and your projects. We usually don't want to share something with you and you just develop it. We want that teams that apply for Web3 grants, at least in this space, in the startup focus space, actually do it because they are convinced about their ideas. Apart from this, there's obviously some core infrastructure we need to support, and here I need to give out a shout out to Kusama and the Polkadot host that is implemented by ChainSafe at the moment. That's also supported via Web3 grants, and other examples are API clients and things like this. We are usually looking for everything that is missing in the open source stack at the moment. So I don't know, for example, if there's a specific smart contract language or something like this, then we are interested in it. If there's a, I don't know, Dart or Swift API client that is potentially useful, then we would be interested in this. Another space we are usually looking for are research projects, and there I would say the crazier the better. So if you want to develop some DAG-based blockchain, I don't know, XYZ consensus with a proof of anything, then we would be interested in it as long as it's reasonable. And other examples, Joe already said, we are interested in governance and treasury systems. And obviously, we are aware that there's still a lot of room to improve these things. So we are also looking for research projects in this sector. I haven't mentioned so far that we actually have 2 grant programs. We started out with a general grants program. That's our legacy grant program that allows submission via Google Forms, and it's more like a regular grants program. Things are paid in fiat, stable coins, Bitcoin. It's up to 100K. It's partly private, so you can make private submissions, and we pay in fiat. Compared to this, we have the new, I would say, default grants program. That's our open grants program. And this is basically our on-chain playing field. So everything takes place on GitHub. We hard code certain rules, like, for example, as soon as 3 people approve an PR, it gets merged. And once it's merged, it's basically accepted. And we also check milestones on-chain. We on-chain, I already say on-chain, on GitHub. Everything needs to be delivered via GitHub. We have the payment is obviously in cryptocurrency. So it's basically our playing field for things like the on-chain treasury. And it's up to 30K, but we are open to issue follow-up grants up to 100K. And it's compared to the general grants program, it's usually very fast. We literally approved applications within 1 hour, because there's nothing like a committee meeting or things like this for regular programs. Basically, everyone can look at the application at any time and approve it or request changes and things like this. Then we, specifically for the open grants program, we try to involve the community. We try to test things that could potentially also run on-chain. Like, for example, anyone can suggest actually grants and grants ideas. So we have this RFP suggestion possibility. You can actually tell us what you need in the ecosystem. That's ideally, it's for example, for parachains that need a specific feature. Then they could say, hey, we are not able to develop this, but it would be very cool if somebody else develops it. And what we do is then we tell our outreach team to potentially find teams, but also we have these list of interesting projects into our in our grants repository. An example for this, besides what I already mentioned, is like, for example, CK rollup stuff that is needed for a gaming chain or API clients. Then we also have another community feature that recently integrated. Like I already said, we have this external milestone evaluation program where people actually can look into deliveries, evaluate them, like we would do publicly on our GitHub, and they can basically do my work to a certain degree and get paid for it. And the idea there is also to scale up the program further, to actually be able to deal with all these grant applications and to improve the program also and make everything very transparent. Because to a certain degree, the money we are spending, we get got through token sales, so we want to give it back to the ecosystem. Now, a quick overview over the Treasury. I don't need to go too much into detail here because Joe already mentioned quite a few things. So in general, it's an on-chain fund, a pot of funds that is basically collected through transaction fees, slashing events, staking inefficiency, things like this, where basically something on-chain is collected and it's not burned for Polkadot and Kusama. Instead, it's collected and you can reuse it for useful things. And it's this Treasury is currently mostly controlled by the council. You could also think about other models there, and then spend it for projects in the ecosystem. And obviously the main goal here is to fund infrastructure, so like core development, useful features, similar to the grants program, but you obviously you're not acting in the same boundaries like the grants program. At the beginning, I said the grants program focuses mostly on the development of open source software. This is completely different for the Treasury. There are no legal restrictions and things like this. You can spend the money on marketing activities, anything that convinces basically the council to spend the money. And some statistics here, for example, on Kusama, there is quite a lot of money available. I don't know the current course, the life of KSM, but 250,000 KSM, already more than 50,000 KSM were spent on projects, 55 proposals, 35 got approved. And there's what's interesting is actually, and Joe didn't mention, I think, is that there's a burn rate. And this is basically an incentive for the Treasury to not just keep collecting the money, to not just grow indefinitely, but to actually spend the money to develop the ecosystem. And the same is true for Polkadot. Obviously, the numbers are a little bit lower because the network launched later, but overall it's similar. Something special about Kusama is actually that the money is not burned, but it's given to the society, which is kind of a crazy project to support the ecosystem, but also the awareness of the network. You can actually get a tattoo for joining the society. We have different interfaces currently for the on-chain Treasury. On the one hand, it's Polka Samply. On the other hand, there's Commonwealth, but I know quite a few other teams are working on it. And sorry. And in general, I think something that is often forgotten is that obviously there's a lot of experiments going on the lower levels regarding the exact implementation, but especially when it comes to things like Treasury, like voting and stuff, also you need to experiment and learn a lot about the UI and improve this. And yeah, maybe not just to give you a few additional points regarding the Treasury. So there are different mechanisms currently available in order to spend the money. On the one hand, it's just the regular proposal. There you are able to get basically a big grant up front to work on your project. But in order to receive this, you have to make a deposit on chain. This can obviously be done by anyone. If somebody else thinks your project is interesting, then they could pay 5% of the total project budget up front and receive this money back later. Then there's this tips mechanism where anyone can basically submit a small tip for different work that is done already in the ecosystem, and then the council also needs to approve these tips. But that's usually for smaller things like, I don't know, translating Wikipedia articles, helping with documentation, and so on. And then there's also the newly integrated bounty mechanism, because something we learned quite early is that proposals and tips don't scale very well because the council cannot look into everything and double check everything. That's why actually the community created a bounty runtime module. So this was not developed by Parity, but others like Kala, Polkadot, they came together and said, hey, we have an interest in leveraging the Treasury potentially in the future, and we want to be paid by it. So we want to ensure that the Treasury is actually, the money is used in the best way. And they came up with this bounty mechanism that is also now integrated into Sama and Polkadot. And there, it's a little bit like the grants program, because the council basically assigns a curator, or we call it evaluator for the grants program, that looks into the project and takes care of it. This could also be a multi-sig or multiple people taking care of it, but it's basically outsourcing different work in order to scale up the system. And the first bounty was actually to develop the UI for this bounty module. So this will be ready very soon, hopefully. And here, also to the right, you can see Polkadot.js. For everyone who isn't aware of it, that's basically the default interface where you can play around with everything and see the different tools and mechanisms. And the differentiation specifically regarding the grants program, because if you are interested in this talk, the chances are high that you want to actually apply for a grant and receive money for your project. And then usually people ask, should I initially apply for the Treasury or for grants? So then it usually comes down to a few things. If you are interested in open source development and research, then the Open Grants program gives you some help that the Treasury currently doesn't, because it's a little bit more structured. We usually try to help grants team in our ecosystem. Like we once you deliver your project, or already if you apply for a grant, we actually look into your grant. We try to help you because we have an interest that you are successful to a certain degree in our ecosystem. So we point you to existing technology and things like this that's currently not so well structured for the Treasury at the moment. But on the other hand, we have certain boundaries. We are only focusing on open source development. We don't support things like marketing activities or other things. So if this is interesting for you, then you should probably apply for the Treasury. And we, as I said, we usually focus on this early stage phase and supporting initial proof of concepts, infrastructure development. But when it comes actually to maintaining this infrastructure, then the Treasury might be more interesting if you actually want to create some public good parachain, for example, where you don't want to create your token model and create a business model around your idea, then the Treasury might be the right place to talk to people, because there, compared to the grants program, we simply focus on the technology. But with the Treasury, you need to convince the community to a certain degree to fund your project. And it's independent of Web3, which is also a benefit regarding potential legal issues, just in case they exist, or other restrictions. And an advantage or disadvantage is that there's no payment in fiat, obviously. At least right now, there's no Oracle system in place. That's more or less already my presentation. And I'm happy to discuss potential questions.
Great, thank you very much, David. That was super interesting, and excited to see the UI when it's live. It becomes a little bit more real. Yeah. So
it's usually very interesting to see projects in our ecosystem. When you get the initial grant application, you don't know what the end result.
Yeah.
It's surprising how well a project evolves over time.
That's great. Well, I've got 2 questions for you. The first question is, how do you balance ambition and practicality when evaluating grants?
Usually you get a good impression if teams are capable and interested in actually doing something. And if this is the case, then I'm to a certain degree already sold on these teams. I try to support them. I potentially put them in touch with other developers in case it would help or benefits the team. I can put them in touch with from Parity, with, I don't know, share these things. But sometimes you also have these teams that just do it for the money. And that's I guess, the biggest problem in our ecosystem. So they develop an idea and they stop working after it. And it will not be maintained. They have no interest in ever actually getting it ready.
Yeah. Awesome. So next question is, awesome to see the growth in the program and great to co-fund at times. This question comes from Juan. What can we, Filecoin PL, or the broader audience do to help more? Funding, reviewing, voting, referring technical teams?
I think we already started working on this, and I'm actually in close contact with Eva from the Protocol Labs team, and Boyar is presenting later. So we are generally, I think, especially with Filecoin, but also with all the other things, we are not really competitors at this stage, because we can help each other, and the space is still fairly small. So we have a huge market to conquer, so we don't just on each other's toes. And I think, we try to do this already. We established chats and exchanges between the different grants managers, and it's nice to see also teams like ThinkSafe that basically work together with everyone, and also are a great place to combine this knowledge and create some exchange.
So exchange knowledge and exchange work?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
And there are a lot of things that are now kind of standards in the system and used by everyone, like WASM, as for example, WebAssembly is something that is now maintained by a lot of teams, and where we all can work together to improve it further.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. This talk was very informative.
thanks for inviting me, and yeah, nice conference.
No problem. Yeah, see you around.
See you.